There has been a fair amount of debate about where Christmas trees come from. One camp claims they come from pagan tree worship, another claims they are a Christianized replacement for pagan tree worship, and another claims they come from Germanic villagers wanting to keep warm during the winter months, and possibly from guilds as a commercialized gimmick for the season, which was documented by the 1500s. It's true that many pagan religions involved trees, wreaths, boughs, and branches of various plants, including possibly sacred groves of oak trees, holly, which was supposedly used by Celtic druids and in Roman feasts before Christ's birth, mistletoe, which was also popular among the Celts all the way back in pre Roman times, and ivy, which has been used in traditional English celebrations, but has been thought to stem together with laurels and palm branches, at least in part from Greek and Roman traditions, at least as early as the 4th century BC. Greek and Roman traditions only go back so far, though, since the older of these civilizations began in earnest arguably back around the 12th century BC, around the final fall of Troy. But did you know that there is a holiday practice that precedes the Greek and Roman traditions that involves the use of tree paraphernalia for celebrating the most special holiday of the year? I'm talking about the Feast of Tabernacles, in which the Israelites were commanded to gather boughs of goodly trees, branches of palm trees, and willows of the brook to rejoice before the Lord in a week-long feast that seriously rivals modern Christmas celebrations. Moses and the establishment of Israel as its own nation preceded the founding of both the Greek and Roman empires, and these festivities were commanded and documented at the time, proving that they have an earlier origin. But what possible connection could this Israelite feast have to German Christmas trees nearly 3,000 years later? We do know that as part of the Israelite diasporas, the 10 tribes were carried away into the north countries, and this is why we call them the lost tribes. We lost track of them. But which north countries? Originally, Assyria. But they're not just all sitting there somewhere in a village in Iraq just waiting to be discovered. They were scattered far and wide. It's not that hard to get a general idea from a map which countries are definitely north of Israel and are candidates for their destinations. Norse and German mythology actually have a surprising number of uncanny overlaps with Israelite religion. For example, the world tree Yggdrasil, which together with every other tradition having such a tree, is a clear borrowing from the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil in the Garden of Eden. They also have accounts of a great flood, 3 major heavens, and a prophecy of an end-time battle. The ancient Germanic harvest festival of Erntedankefest also has elements that mirror biblical harvest feasts. And you remember the Celts and their use of oaks, holly, and ivy in their feasts? They also have a fall festival that in many ways mirrors the ancient Israelite feast. In fact, their harvest festival, Samhain, is known originally to have strongly resembled the Israelite Day of Atonement, the Feast of Tabernacles, and Passover, and their rituals included harvest and first fruit offerings which are strikingly similar to those commanded in the book of Leviticus, suggesting a possible earlier origin for their fascination with festive plants. In fact, pagan traditions worldwide show strong signs of common origins in all of these respects and more. We already know in the case of Greek and Roman traditions that these are predated by Israelite traditions, which the Greco-Roman practices replicate at many points. As I showed in another video, the oldest Greek and Roman theogony is actually a carbon copy of the creation account in Genesis. So it is insufficient to chalk up a tradition merely to being a pagan practice without further examination and correlation of possible origins. A misdirection is repeated every time it is asserted that something had so-called pre-Christian origins. Christianity is the original religion as attested by the records kept by the Jews, which are the most thorough on the subject of any in existence. The lighting of trees with candles has been attributed to Martin Luther in the 16th century, who explained their origin as a reflection of stars twinkling amongst the evergreen trees one winter night, symbolizing Jesus Christ. Yuletide in modern tradition is synonymous with Christmas, and the burning of a Yule log in Scandinavian countries also bears resemblance to the Hanukkah tradition that the oil in the temple menorah lasted 8 days so that the lamp stayed continuously lit for this period despite only having enough oil for 1 day. The Israelite temple menorah is also styled in the form of a tree, representing the tree of life. Is that a possible source of inspiration for the lighting of the Christmas tree? Some botanists have found an evergreen plant native to Palestine after which the temple menorah might plausibly have been modeled. The evergreen tree was chosen for the Germanic midwinter celebrations because it shows signs of life year-round and is also referred to in various cultures as the tree of life for this reason. But wait, didn't Moses lead the children of Israel out of Egypt around 1400 BC, and weren't there pagan rituals among the nations before that time? Many pagan traditions did precede Moses by a long time. Abraham recounts that his father fell into pagan idolatry, corrupting an earlier religion, so we cannot take for granted that the feasts the Lord commanded through Moses were being revealed for the first time merely because it is through Moses that we have such laws together with earlier accounts. In fact, the most basic of the Lord's feasts, the weekly Sabbath day, originated before Adam was born. and the practices accompanying each of the messianic feasts, including the building of altars, animal sacrifices, burnt offerings, first fruit, and other harvest offerings, and the Passover sacrifice itself, are known to predate Moses by thousands of years. The sukkah, or booth, in the Messianic Feast of Tabernacles has been decorated for at least 1,000 years before the first known example of a decorated Christmas tree, and the tree branches were used both in the construction of huts for the holiday and as handheld branches to be waved for worship, as in Palm Sunday, not unlike the use of holly by the Celtic Druids. In its earliest forms, the only difference might have been the variety of plants that were locally available. Orthodox Jews to this day create special bouquets to be used in a daily procession and Hosanna shout during the Feast of Tabernacles. So, peeling back the layers of paganism, it becomes apparent that even more depth is needed to address the subject, and it does not suffice to say that Christmas trees must be rooted in paganism merely because pagans used tree branches and so on in their worship, since all of them have apparently inherited and modified such traditions from earlier religious practices. Now, I'm not saying that Abraham or other ancient patriarchs cut down pine trees to decorate with lights and ornaments to put up in their residences every year on December 25th with a bunch of presents underneath. But what we do know is that the Greco-Roman use of palm leaves, laurels, and other plant matter in their festivals, together with the practice of harvest feasts, first fruit offerings, animal sacrifices, and so on, all began long before the civilizations we think of as pagan even existed, and were therefore almost certainly borrowed from one or more precursor civilizations. The history kept by the Israelites goes back to the beginning of the world, and documents most of these practices that far back. Acknowledging the reality of these symbols and festivals of Christ before his coming in the flesh, and from which the pagan festivals themselves are evidently a corruption, we can candidly say that if pagans ever worshipped or adorned trees, we can indeed reclaim such flora for the Savior by remembering and keeping the original feasts of Christ, with their origins dating back to the beginning of the world and the purpose for which they were given. One other possible connection is that the fir tree, the tree used for the Christmas tree, is a species of the kind the ark was made of, in Noah's day, which is called gopher wood in the scriptures. Is the Christmas tree an annual memorial of God saving the world from flood by a humble pine tree? These observations have given me pause to think about where Christmas trees may have originated. What local customs were had by your ancestors? Where do you think Christmas trees came from? Answer in the comments. Merry Christmas. What customs and traditions did your ancestors have?